Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. A solid week of Granite State debates is in the books. Usually, the election cycles without U.S. Senate races can feel just a little smaller than the years under a bigger national spotlight. But with open seat races for governor and in the 2nd District, there's a lot of attention and a lot at stake. Here to break down the action on the debate stage this last week, two great strategic minds from the opposite sides of the political spectrum. We have Mike Dennehy of Dennehy and Boulay and Steve Marchand, former mayor of Portsmouth. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So first, I'd just like to hear your big takeaways from this week of debates on the governor and 2nd District races. First with you, Mike.
Yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway is that we've always had a spirited primary in Republican circles, but this is the biggest serious back and forth, heated debate between Democrats for the corner office. It's great to see that Democrats are challenging each other for a change. That's what really hits me most is the fierceness between the two.
Yeah. What about you, Steve?
Well, I want to piggyback on the gubernatorial comment. I've been involved a time or two in those sort of things, and unlike a lot of other ones, there's been very small, if any, real differences on policy between the two major gubernatorial candidates. And even in terms of gender, demography, pretty similar. Usually you get a stark contrast or 10 that allows for differences that don't feel particularly edgy. Because you can talk about, like, are you for the income tax or are you against the income tax? These sort of things. There wasn't that this time, and that meant that to find differences, you had to go find the biggest weakness of the other and go get it. And it took about 15 months to go there, but man, the other night, they went there.
Yeah, and let's take a look at one of those contrast moments. You know, there was an interesting question in the lightning round where we asked them about the death sentence hanging over Michael Addison, who is the person who killed Manchester police officer Michael Briggs in 2006. Obviously, the death penalty has been repealed prospectively in New Hampshire, but his case is still out there, and he's fighting to have that overturned. We asked the candidates what they would do in terms of having their AG either fight to keep that sentence in place or accede essentially to his request. Let's take a look. As governor, would you urge your attorney general to reverse course and not enforce the death penalty? Mayor Craig.
No.
Councilor Warmington.
I have been on the record as I am opposed to the death penalty, and I would be in favor, of course, working with the Executive Council of commuting the sentence to life without the possibility of parole.
Start with you here. This is a big issue for Democrats. What do you make of the difference of opinion here?
Well, when I ran in 2016, this actually was a pretty significant difference. I had Cindy's position and my opponents had Joyce's position. It is interesting that in many other positions, whether it was on cannabis legalization, abortion codification, other hot-button issues, the Democratic Party has largely coalesced into one position. This is one of the few areas over the last 8 to 10 years that I've seen continued delineation within the party, and I think there's a lot of discomfort. It's a very difficult issue, to be sure. It's an emotional issue, to be sure. And I appreciated the question was asked because it was one of the few places, frankly, on policy where there was an actual difference between the two candidates that was black and white, and that was helpful for voters, I think.
And Mike, there are added complications here as well because Kelly Ayotte is the prosecutor who got that sentence for Addison, and there's the Manchester angle for Joyce Craig and her relationship with the Manchester Police Department. So there are layers here.
There are. I'll say this. Kudos to Cindy Warmington for holding true to a position. It's a big problem for her if she wins the general election. It's not a popular position to let cop killers go without a death sentence. Kelly Ayotte worked hard. If Kelly's the nominee, Cindy's the nominee, this will be a big difference and I think a big issue in the election because it goes right to soft on crime for Cindy Warmington.
There was another person on the stage in this debate, John Kuiper, outsider candidate running a restaurateur from Newmarket. Some people saw him kind of as a palate cleanser at times in this debate, but he really drew a contrast at the end, and let's take a look at the clip of him from that.
It's pretty simple, okay? Cindy Warmington will lose to Kelly Ayotte because of her ties to Purdue Pharma. Joyce Craig will lose to Kelly Ayotte because of homelessness in Manchester. I don't think it's either their faults that these things are going to bring them down, but frankly, those are the facts.
Is he right here? Is this a profit or is he just trying to win this primary?
He's trying to win the primary, and by the way, not a criticism. He's doing his job in that role. There was, in hindsight, this has been going on for almost a year and a half now between the two sides. There, in hindsight, probably was an opening for a third candidate who would have had who could find stark differences, both everything from being a male to some policy differences that he's tried to make evident. The thing he did there, and this is nuanced, but it's really important, you notice at the end of his answer, he didn't say, Cindy's awful on this thing, Joyce is awful on this thing, and that's why they're going to lose. He actually said, look, it's not fair, but this is politics. And I think one of the things I've been struck by with Cindy and Joyce is by not adding that extra point of saying that kind of, look, I'm not even saying it's legitimate. I'm saying that in politics, this is going to be something they're going to punch you in the face on. It makes it edgier, and it makes it a little harder to come together, whoever wins the primary, the morning after. So I don't think he ended up being the right vehicle as this third choice. But there was an opening there, and I think in the last several weeks he's at least tried to exploit that opportunity, including in that answer.
Before we move to the Republicans, Mike, did Cindy Warmington do enough in this debate to close the gap with Joyce Craig?
Oh, I think she did. I think she did. First, I want to tell you, I think that was Kuiper's smartest move of the night, smartest comment of the night, because you add Chuck Morse to that as well. Kelly Ayotte or Chuck Morse will beat the Democrats because, let's face it, they're going after Chris Sununu, who has been probably the best governor we have seen in decades. So they're moving into the Republican corner office, promising to govern just like Chris Sununu. People in New Hampshire don't want that change. So either one of them is going to beat the Democrats in November. It's just a question about how much. Well, if you want me to continue.
Well, yeah, let's go to the Republican race, though, because, you know, this one there's a big polling lead for Kelly Ayotte. Chuck Morse is doing what he can and tried to do what he could do on this stage to try and narrow that gap. Let's take a look at some of the attacks that he launched on this stage.
When Kelly talks about Blackstone and basically says, I'm acting like a Democrat, the only one that's acting like a Democrat is the board of Blackstone. They contributed to the Democrats constantly when they made these record profits.
We do need people at the table. We need the private sector at the table. We need everyone. So yes, he does sound like a Democrat because that's what Democrats do. They attack private business instead of working with them.
Steve, Morse's decision not to go quietly in this race, you know, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that Chuck, respectfully, is a move up or move out. This is probably his last real opportunity to go for statewide office. He ran for U.S. Senate, you know, that sort of thing. So for him, there's nothing to lose in that respect. Not unlike what I said about John Kuiper a moment ago. Chuck is in a stronger position, much stronger fundraising, better name ID, and so forth. But a different candidate with a different profile who had a deeper and frankly more authentic MAGA Trump background might have had a much bigger opening to make this a real contest, which it doesn't appear like it's going to be on primary night. But Chuck, he was never a comfortable match. And of course, Donald Trump ended up not endorsing him in this contest, and he really needed that in order to make this a real primary.
That's a good segue to our next soundbite, and we'll get you to react to that, Mike. You know, Chuck Morse has had two different positions now. This was pointed out after the debate on January 6th. We asked him essentially, did Mike Pence do the right thing? He said one thing, he had a different answer in 2022. Take a listen.
About the 2020 election, if you were a senator on January 6th, would you have objected to the certification of electors?
No.
Yes or no, did Mike Pence do the right thing on January 6th?
No. No. I believe the fact is we ought to first make sure we have the facts, and then we follow the law based on the facts.
Mike, what does this tell us about the influence of Trump and the MAGA movement on Republican politics?
Well, I think it says a lot, Adam, especially about Republican primary voters in general. They love Donald Trump. They believe in Donald Trump. Chuck Morse is the biggest Donald Trump supporter in the state of New Hampshire and has been over the last couple of years. So I'm not totally surprised that he has been convinced that Mike Pence did the wrong thing. The Republican Party is fully embraced Donald Trump, and I think he's making a last-ditch effort, too, for an endorsement. It could come, you know, who knows, today.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. You know, Trump has not necessarily played in as many races in New Hampshire as we thought, but we'll see. All right, stay right where you are. We'll be right back to break down the 2nd Congressional District debates.